My nightmare mother-in-law is ruining my marriage and my health. My husband and I have been together for 5 years and are expecting our first child. The only problem is my mother-in-law, who keeps ruining everything we have and is constantly making my mental health worse. The problem started during the virus. My husband lived with mother-in-law and I lived with my family, including my 90-year-old grandfather with late-stage Parkinson's, so we quarantined away from each other for the sake of my grandfather. At one point, when the vid had subsided a bit, we had planned for my husband to stay with my family for a few weeks so we could see each other. The plan was that he would quarantine for a week before coming to my family's place. Mother-in-law knew of this plan. While he was quarantining, she decided to take an impromptu trip to Florida with 8 of her friends, this was during the travel ban, and came back with the vid. My husband and I could not see each other, and he had to miss work for 2 weeks without pay. When we confronted her to tell her how we felt, she flew off the handle and said a slew of hurtful things, insulting me personally and attacking my past for no reason. She accused me of being controlling too. She accused me of forcing her son to be mad at her. Apparently, if I wasn't in the picture, there's no way her son would be upset or treating her this way. From there things continued escalating, especially while planning our wedding. We were having a small wedding, so I told mother-in-law that she was welcome to invite up to 10 people of her choosing. She called me and asked if she could invite a few more, insisting that she would pay for the additional friends since she knew we were on a tight budget and couldn't afford to expand the guest list too much. She ended up inviting an additional 45 people whom neither my husband nor I know. When we asked her how she was going to pay for the additional friends, she insisted that she never made such an offer. We were stuck with a wedding bill that had increased by almost 60% and no way to pay for it. Mother-in-law had also been a nightmare about other wedding-related things and had generally been acting as though the party was about her and she was the bride, insisting on showing up wearing white. At this point, my mother-in-law offered us $25,000 to cancel the entire wedding. She said that, since we clearly weren't enjoying ourselves, the money would be better spent on something like a house as opposed to a wedding. Because we were so miserable planning the wedding, and also could not afford the additional people my mother-in-law had invited, we went through with it and canceled our wedding. We ended up eloping with a few close family members. When we asked for the $25,000, mother-in-law insisted it was a misunderstanding and that she never offered us the money. We are both lawyers and had multiple conversations with mother-in-law about the logistics of the $25,000, there was absolutely no misunderstanding. We never received the money. We ended up sending her a letter about how upset we were about the wedding and asking for an apology or some form of accountability. Again, we were gaslit and were attacked. I was accused of being the mastermind puppeteering my husband to be mad at her, and we were accused of having no consideration for how any of this makes her feel. Husband and I started therapy and learned about the importance of boundaries. We tried implementing boundaries and asked for some space while we worked through how upset we are over the wedding and the lack of accountability. My husband's biggest boundary was to stop her accusing me of puppeteering him to be mad at her. The talk about boundaries did not go over well. We were asked why we thought we could unilaterally make decisions, and that we were intentionally trying to hurt her as punishment, despite her doing everything she could to make the situation right. Over the next few months we had a distant relationship, but were able to see her on occasion. When we did see her, snarky comments would always be made. Husband and I eventually found out we were pregnant and were very happy. A few weeks after finding out we were pregnant, my husband made a horrible mistake. He went to an intimacy club at a bachelor party and had a private lap dance. This was a very dark time for us. After intense therapy and many long and difficult conversations, my husband and I are in a much better place now and are committed to the marriage. When I first found out about the club, I kicked him out of the house so that I had some time to calm down. I was in my first trimester and was struggling with severe morning sickness. He went to mother-in-law's house. I spoke with her about the situation and told her I needed some time, and to please keep this information private. Almost immediately after that phone call, my mother-in-law called my sister-in-law and told her everything. Mother-in-law then fabricated a story about how my sister-in-law found out and told my sister-in-law to repeat the same lie to me. My mother-in-law eventually came clean about the lie, but insisted she was not sorry for telling my sister-in-law. For me, this was the last straw. I called my husband and said that if our marriage was going to work out, he needed to be willing to walk away from mother-in-law and focus on repairing the damage to our relationship. Husband said he needed to think about it, and I hung up in a fury. After I hung up with husband, I realized almost immediately that I had given him an unfair ultimatum. I called him back less than 5 minutes later, apologized, and told him that he could handle mother-in-law however he wanted and that I would support him. Unfortunately, husband had already told mother-in-law that I asked him to cut her out of his life. This caused mother-in-law to completely lose her mind. She sent a slew of abusive texts and emails, all directed at me. She accused me of breaking my marriage vows and the 10 Commandments by asking husband to cut her out of his life. She told husband that I was on a path to unhappiness and that my ultimatums would leave him isolated and alone. She told him that I was akin to the false mother from the Solomon parable, because if I really loved him, I would never ask him to give up his family. She questioned my ability to be a mother as I didn't hesitate to cut her out of my child's life. It got so bad that I was on the verge of a mental break. I stopped being able to work, eat or sleep. We decided to explain to mother-in-law that because she couldn't respect our request for time and space, that we would be temporarily blocking her on everything and would reach out when we were ready. That's when she started involving other people. She told husband's grandfather that I was forcing husband to not speak to her. This prompted the grandfather to get on a plane and insist on meeting us for lunch. Husband told him that we could meet for lunch, but that we were not open to discussing mother-in-law because at that time we needed space. He agreed. We had a lovely lunch where the grandfather wished me and the baby well. At the end of lunch, he handed husband an envelope. Inside was a 4-page letter about how horrible I was, handwritten by him and mother-in-law. Mother-in-law also started contacting my family, and reached out to my husband's friends' parents, and eventually began texting my husband's friends directly asking them to meet up with them. At that point, my husband felt he had no choice but to reinitiate contact to ask her to stop involving other people. He wanted to give her one last chance to show remorse for the things said about me and understand that, in order to have a relationship, they needed to respect husband as an adult capable of making his own decisions, and respect us as parents. The conversation was gray. Husband basically had to force an apology out of her, which was always qualified with things like "I'm sorry, but someone should never make another person stop talking to their family." She agreed to respect our marriage but didn't see a problem with her past behavior. I mentioned that I am worried about having her around our baby, and she accused me of being bizarre for being worried about that, because she is a good person. We hung up more confused than ever. Now, because she is unblocked, she is asking to meet up with husband for lunch. Everyone keeps telling me to not give her any of my mental energy, but I just can't get over the things that have been said, and I have no faith that she will act differently in the future.